practice, is everything. So if you want to start photographing quilts, just get in there and start photographing them and just practice. But I would say maybe the most common mistake I see is lighting. And lighting can be really tough because if it's too sunny outside, even if you're in your house and the sun is shining through the windows, your photos can look harsh and the shadows can look harsh too. But if it's not enough light, then your photos can look grainy.
Welcome to the Quilt Scouts podcast. I'm Megan, your Quilt Scout leader and fellow adventurous quilter. This is a cozy campfire chat for quilters who crave creativity, community, and a gentle nudge to try something new. Each week, we'll talk about quilting and the small adventures that help us grow more confident, one stitch at a time. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get into it. In this episode, I sit down and talk all things quilt photography with Megan Saenz, known online as the Quiltographer. And when I say quilt photographer, I mean the real deal. Megan has photographed quilts for designers across the country and has been the photographer behind 5 quilt books, capturing entire collections of projects in a way that feels cohesive, artistic, and true to each maker's vision. She's also photographed for magazines, pattern releases, and editorial features, turning quilts into full-on visual storytelling. Now, if you don't already know, inside Quilt Scouts, we have the Quilt Photography Badge, and this is very intentional. You pour so much time, intention, and heart into your quilts, learning how to document them beautifully in a way that honors the stitching, the color choices, the tiny, fussy cut details. That's part of the adventure. Inside this episode, Megan shares how she went from high school darkroom photography to building a niche career photographing quilts. She also shares what makes quilt photography completely different from other types of photography and the small shifts that you can make that will instantly elevate your photos, even if you're just using your phone. If earning your quilt photography badge is on your list, or you simply want your quilts to shine on Instagram, in pattern covers, or in future books of your own, this conversation is going to give you both inspiration and practical tools. Let's dive in. Megan, welcome to the Quilt Scouts podcast. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be on the podcast, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. I've been a big fan of your work for a while. I follow you on Instagram. You have the most beautiful quilt photos. You're known as the Quiltographer on Instagram, so that is your specialty. So tell me a little bit about that. Tell me a little about yourself.
So, I started photography in high school. I am not a great artist. I can't draw. I'm not good at painting. So when I had to take a required art course, I took photography because I was like, well, it doesn't, it's a different kind of art. And I fell in love. I loved working with cameras. I loved working in the dark room that we had in the school. But after I graduated high school, I went to college and I majored in education, and that left no time to kind of develop photography skills further in an educational setting. When I started having kids, I decided to pick photography back up. So I bought a new camera and learned how to use it manually. And for years, I did lots of photography with people. I did lots of, family sessions, senior sessions. I did weddings. And when I learned to quilt, a friend of mine forced me to learn how to quilt. She was like, you have to learn how to do this. So she taught me. And when I finished my first quilt, I was like, oh, I'll use my camera to photograph it. And that's kind of how I started photographing quilts. And then I started photographing my friends' quilts. And in 2020, we started Modish Quilter magazine. And that was a digital magazine, but I did the photography for that. And yeah, I would say that's how I got into quilt photography.
So you were a photographer first that found
Yes.
quilting is really
Yes.
the order of those events. Nice. It's so funny. So I actually took a photography class in high school too. And I remember the dark room, you had to develop your own film
Yeah.
and it was a whole thing.
I haven't done it since high school, but it was fun to learn, all those
Yeah.
different skills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now we all have, the digital cameras and stuff like that. I don't know if anyone really develops film. I mean, sure, someone develops film, but yeah, back in the day, right? Back in the day when you had to go into the dark room and develop them all.
I guess I'm aging myself too there.
Was there a moment when you realized, okay, so this could actually be more than just a side thing, like a turning point where it shifted from a hobby to a real direction?
So when I started with Modest Quilter magazine, that was it was a lot of work. And the photography part was really fun. And we started going to QuiltCon. And at QuiltCon, a lot of people commented on the photography in the magazines, and people started asking me if I had a business card or a way that they could contact me so that I could photograph their quilts too. And I would say that's pretty much when it realized that it could become like a real thing, not just like, oh, like I photograph my own quilts and for my friends. I started having people from all over the country mail me quilts to photograph so they could use as their marketing photos when they did pattern releases. And since then, I've also photographed 5 quilt books, which I think is amazing. I like still can't believe that I've done that. And just lots of pattern release photos for pattern designers.
That's amazing. So you photographed for 5 books now.
The 5th book hasn't been released yet, so I just did the photos for it a few months ago.
That's cool. Can you tell us which books you've photographed for?
Yes, I will go get them so I can give you the proper titles. So the first book I photographed was called Merry and Bright Modern Christmas Quilts. It was Christmas themed projects, but ones that you could like potentially have out year round. So they weren't like necessarily Christmas colors. And that was my first one. And they mailed me the quilts from all over because every project was designed by like a different person. So I had lots of different people mailing me quilts. Usually for a book, it's just one designer, right? And they mail you or bring
Huh?
you all the projects. Yeah, so that was an interesting one just because it was so many different pattern designers working together as opposed to just one designer. The next one I did was for Love So Modern, Erin Grogan, and her book is titled Retro Curved Piece Quilts. And that was fun. It's
Yes.
um, full of, vintage designs, and that was fun because that's not something that I normally gravitate towards making myself. So it's fun just to see all of the vintage props that she had to use in the photos. And then I also did
That's so cool.
Modern Day Quilter for Kylie's Quilt Room, Kylie Farron's.
Mhm.
And we did that at her home, and just the area that she had set up for the photos was so beautiful and just so thought out of like for the designs. And so that was a really fun one. And then the last one that's been published is from Modish Quilter magazine, and it's called Stylish Quilter. And that was just like a collection of projects from various magazine issues that we had.
That's amazing. Wow. Erin's book is so fun. Erin's
It
actually a Quilt
is.
Scout, so I'm familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm familiar with her. She has great work. I always love the retro vibes. I bet that was a fun one to photograph. So usually if someone wants their quilt photographed, you said they usually mail it to you and then you'll stage it or do flat lays and things like that.
Yes. Um, both Aaron and Kylie live close enough to me that we did their quilts together. So like in person. So Aaron and I worked together in person, and then Kylie and I worked together in person since the distance wasn't too far. And the photos go a lot faster if you have help with doing the photographs, because putting them up on the wall to photograph can actually be pretty time consuming because you have to step back and make sure that everything is level. And so if you're doing it by yourself, it can take a lot of time to step back and say the left side needs to go up. Then you have to, climb back up and adjust the one side. But if you have two people together, it goes a little faster.
I can imagine. Yeah, you
Yes.
gotta have a helper for sure. Okay, so from your perspective, what makes quilt photography different from other kinds of photography?
So one big difference is in quilt photography, you're photographing like a flat object. So you have to really, depending on the size of the quilt and like the size of the pattern on the quilt, you have to really think about how you are going to style that in photos. Like if it's a large scale pattern, you have to make sure that you're seeing a lot of the quilt in the photos so that you can actually see, the pattern on the quilt. And you have to focus on like the stitching, like especially if there's hand stitching, trying to get in all of those small details that are hard to notice, from a distance. I think,
Yeah, a lot more. Yeah, like you said, small details you're trying to capture.
yeah, and depending on the angle that you take the photos, the quilt could look distorted. So a big key is when you want a photo of the whole quilt to take your photo square on. Whereas in different types of photography, that doesn't matter as much.
Yeah, so you don't have any, like, distortion in, like, the shapes, like, to have it perfectly
Exactly.
squared up. Well, I assume some of that can probably be fixed in editing, but I'm sure to an extent, you know?
Exactly. Some of it can be fixed in editing, but sometimes it is hard or it can't be fixed all the way.
Yeah. Yeah. We've already talked about you've worked on book photography, which feels like a whole different beast from capturing photos for, like, Instagram or for, like, your personal,
Yes.
photo collection. What's something that people don't realize about photographing quilts for books? Is it the logistics, the editing, or, like, just the chaos of it?
Books are a really big job. They're so much fun, but they take a lot more work because first you have to photograph each project in the book individually. So each project needs its own individual photos that are unique, to that project. But you also have to photograph all of them together. And so you end up with a collection of over 100 photos for this book that all have to be, different, but all have to feel cohesive and like fit together as in like a theme.
Yeah. Okay, I can see that. Yeah, you wanna have yeah, that would be kind of complicated. You wanna have enough variety so that it's interesting to look at, but, like,
Right.
cohesive. Yeah. So you have to get really creative with your staging and probably different things.
I just use my house and I have some large walls that I'll use for like the whole quilt photos, but then I just use the spaces in my house to style them. And so I use just things that I have like different throw pillows and rooms that I think that those particular quilts will match well with.
Do the quilt designers will they send you, like, props and things to use with their photos? I'm curious.
No, not usually because just the cost of shipping, things like that would probably be a lot.
Yeah.
But I do like to ask them in advance before I take the photos if they have anything specific in mind that they would like showcased or different styles of how they would like the photos done.
How does your approach shift between photographing for a book versus social media or, like, editorial work? I don't know if yeah, editorial work because you were photographing for the magazine. So how does your approach change from those different platforms?
For editorial work, I love to kind of like be extra a little bit. So I love doing quilts in the wild photos and just really trying to think of a good place to photograph those individual quilts. And that's a lot easier when you're only photographing maybe one or two quilts versus a collection of 10 to 15 quilts. Also, for any quilt photos outside, you need two people because someone has to hold the quilt for you. So that's another thing to keep in mind is do you have an extra helper or would I have an extra helper to help photograph those in the wild?
Who is usually your quilt holder?
Kylie Farrens from Kylie's Quilt Room. We will text each other and say, well, who's up for quilt photos? And we'll go out on little quilt photo adventures.
Do you have to take a little hike to get the perfect scenery?
Sometimes, yes. We live close to Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, and we've done a lot of quilt photos there, but it involves a lot of walking around. And sometimes we've even taken wagons or like a baby stroller to, put all the quilts in to carry them around with us. They get kind of heavy.
Yeah. I can imagine. Well, with the Quilt Scouts, we have the quilt photography badge and the hike for quilt photos badge. So right there, I mean, you've checked off two of them just with one project. And if you pack a lunch and have a picnic on the quilt, you've accomplished picnic on a quilt badge too.
Exactly. It's a perfect day.
Yeah, exactly, exactly, in my opinion. Do you have a favorite shoot where it's like, I can't believe we just pulled that off?
So I loved so many of the shoots we did for Modish Quilter magazine. But one in particular that comes to mind is the one we did for the rainbow issue. So I had this vision of doing a big balloon arch full of like rainbow balloons and we would photograph the cover quilt with this big balloon arch. We had never done a balloon arch. We didn't own an arch or so we went out bought a huge set of balloons, blew them up in my living room, and we had to transport all of them to a place in Harper's Ferry so we could get it outside, with the mountains in the background. And we're out there and people are, hiking and things around us. And we are putting, 150 balloons on this arch to take quilt photos. And so it was kind of funny, I guess, probably to see that. But the photos are beautiful. And I just love all of the ones we did from that issue. So I would say probably that shoot.
That sounds like you had to learn a whole new skill, how to make a balloon arch before you could even set up the shoot.
Exactly.
Okay, I have to see this picture. Is there somewhere online that I can like link in the show notes so people can see this photo? Because I feel like this we need the receipt.
Is there like if I sent you the photo, would that work?
Yeah, we can figure that out, and I'll just attach a link. As I've made plenty of balloon arches for like my kid's birthday, so birthdays, I feel like I do one every year. So, and that's a task and a half.
It takes a lot of work to put those together.
Yeah. What are the most common mistakes you see quilters make when they're photographing their work?
I would
And I ask that lovingly because I absolutely like I've made plenty of mistakes, I'm sure, with my, photographing, but I'm just curious, what do you see from your perspective?
Well, first practice, is everything. So if you want to start photographing quilts, just get in there and start photographing them and just practice. If there's things in your photos that you know that you don't love, you can Google how to adjust those things and just practice and learn. But I would say maybe the most common mistake I see is lighting. And lighting can be really tough because if it's too sunny outside, even if you're in your house and the sun is shining through the windows, if it's too sunny, your photos can look harsh and the shadows can look harsh too. But if it's not enough light, then your photos can look grainy. I prefer myself to shoot with natural light, but on a cloudy day. So that way I'm getting the natural light, but also none of those harsh shadows from the sun.
Yeah. Okay. So lighting is like the number one, getting the right lighting. And that takes just practice. Like you said, I think
Practice.
you got to shoot probably more bad photos than good photos, or you're going to have to shoot 100 photos to get a couple good ones.
And you'll learn the places in your house that have better lighting than other rooms. So, like, or even what times of the day those rooms will have the best lighting. So, I like to shoot in parts of my house in the morning, but then if it's the afternoon, I know that I'll have to move to other rooms in the house because of the angle of the sun coming in.
That's so funny. I have the same thing. I'm in my studio right now and I have like a window in front of me and my desk in front of me, right? And yeah, there's only like a small window in the afternoon when I feel like I have the right light for doing
Yes,
photos and video, like if I'm shooting for a tutorial. And if I miss that window during the day, I'm like, well, I have to wait till tomorrow.
exactly. Yeah, it can be hard. Sometimes, if I must do them that day and it's really sunny, I will tape a white sheet over the windows to try to soften that light coming in.
Yes. Yeah, that's a really good tip. I actually just added some light filtering curtains to my window, and I don't know why I didn't think of it sooner. My friend had mentioned something. She's like, well, why don't you just put light filtering curtains up? I'm like, oh, yeah, that'd be smart.
Yeah.
Extend my hours for photography a little bit that way.
Yeah.
When you're photographing a quilt, how do you decide how it should be styled? Like flat, draped, in use? What guides that choice for you?
So when people mail me quilts, I have like a checklist of different photos that I try to take for all of them. So I try to do a flat photo for all of them where it's up on the wall and I'll take some by itself and then I'll style that on the wall with some props like plants or chairs. But then how it's styled throughout my house, a lot of that depends on one, the size of the quilt and the size of the pattern on the quilt. Just mentioned that a little bit earlier in the interview, but if it's a very large scale pattern, you want to make sure that you're seeing enough of the quilts in the photos where you can see the pattern. Like a 20-inch star is going to be a lot different to photograph than if you had a series of like 6-inch stars because you're going to see more of that pattern of the quilt in a photo. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
that makes sense. So, for someone brand new to quilt photography, maybe they just want to take better Instagram photos or submit their pattern for like a tester call or submit photos for like a show, things like that. What's the first skill that they should focus on?
Say lighting and phones today take amazing photos. So you really don't need a fancy camera to take your own quilt photos. Admittedly, I use my phone a lot for photos of my own quilts just because it's so much handier and I can edit the photos right on my phone versus using my laptop. So use your phone and just practice and experiment. That's the word I was looking for. Experiment. Try out different rooms in your house. Try also like different viewpoints. Like sometimes it's fun to like lay your quilt on the floor and like climb up on a ladder and like look down at your quilt. Or drape it on your couch, and then stand above it and maybe sit on the floor and get, a shot straight on. But just practice and see what photos you like and how you can replicate what's in there for future photos. So a small change that can instantly improve a quilt photo. I always edit my photos, always, even if it's just like a small amount of editing that needs to be done. I will always edit them, and that's because I like my photos to look consistent. So if you look at my Instagram, at least my hope is that the style is similar, the editing style is similar through all the photos. And I just like to adjust things in the photos like brightness, contrast, and I will up the vibrancy a little bit. And there are so many photo editing apps that you can use, and a lot of them are free. And personally, I like to use Lightroom, which does have a free version. So you can also experiment with editing photos in Lightroom too.
I love Lightroom. I use that for a lot of my photos as well. They have some great tools on there.
Yeah, they do.
So I think a lot of quilters struggle with feeling like their photos don't look professional enough. How can someone start developing a photography style that feels like them instead of, feeling like they're copying someone else's style?
I love this question. And I think it's important to have photos that feel like you because all of us, I think, have a distinct style, maybe as a quilter, of like things that we are drawn towards. And, some people are drawn towards maybe like softer, more like vintagey or traditional style quilting. Some quilters love doing like modern prints and patterns. And I think you can kind of take those styles that you notice in your quilting and try to mimic them in your photography. It's like, do you like soft colors? Then maybe for your photos, use like neutral backdrops or like cozy spaces where like the colors are also neutral, but there's lots of different textures in the photo. Do you like modern quilts? You can shoot for like clean spaces, like minimalistic spaces with strong lines in your photos and like scrappy quilts. I love scrappy quilts and they're super fun. And you can incorporate a lot of like color in those photos too, because a lot of scrappiness is like many colors together. So just thinking of like fun, playful props for those kinds of photos. So I guess my answer to this one is look at your quilting style and see how you can mimic that in photos.
If I had to summarize that, kind of leaning into the things that you're drawn to. Is that
Yes,
like maybe a good way to say that? Like instead of trying to replicate something else that you're seeing. Yeah, I feel like I'm just like reflecting back on my own photography and like the things that I'm always kind of drawn to the same colors, the same pattern, just leaning into that and doing more of that to kind of get cohesive look to all your photos.
exactly.
So you've seen tons of quilts up close through a lens. How has photographing quilts changed how you see quilts themselves?
So I started photographing quilts around the same time as I started making quilts. Before that, quilts weren't a huge part of my life. So I had no idea, previously how much time goes into making these quilts. And I love seeing them in person and noticing all of those small details. Even things like the fussy cut squares, how much time, it would take someone to cut out those fussy cut pieces that they want showcased, or making sure that all of your fabric goes in the same direction. Now that I'm a quilter, I can like see, recognize, and appreciate all of the time that people have taken to put into these quilts. And also what I love about them is that they're comfortable quilts that you can use for so many things, but also they are like a standalone art piece that you could put on your wall in your house. And it is art and people love them. And you can take it off the wall and put it on your bed. You can put it on your couch. You can turn it into a coat. Like it's just so versatile.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I've never thought of it like that. But what type of other art can you do that with? You know what I mean? Like you can't do that with a
Exactly.
painting. You can't do that with a photo print on the wall. Like that's such a good perspective. I absolutely love that. What has quilt photography taught you about creativity? Like not just technically, but like creatively about risk, about storytelling, about patience, trying to capture the right photo.
When I was younger, I never used to think that I was creative because I couldn't draw, I couldn't paint, I didn't have like any of those types of art skills. So I just kind of thought like I wasn't an artistic person. But then when I found photography and started doing photography, not just for people, but for quilts too, I realized that this is a great way to be creative because there's so many different aspects of photography and so many things that you have to think about when doing photography. Like, what part of this do I want the viewer to focus on in the photo? So, like, where's the eye going to be drawn in this photo? How do I style this quilt and still have the quilt be the main focus of the photo, but have everything around it be beautiful as well? And it's fun because one quilt can tell so many different stories based on how it's photographed.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. Just giving a different perspective.
Exactly. And so, a lot of times people, when I tell them that I do quilt photography, they're like, "What? You do quilt photography?" I'm like, "Yes, it's a real thing. It's a real skill too." And it's just shows that creativity can there's no bounds. You can, choose to do anything. And I think as long as you are enjoying what you're doing, like that's the point of being creative, right? Is to do something that you love that allows you to expand those skills in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for listeners who are immediately going to want to follow everything that you do, because I know they will, where's the best place for them to find you right now? On Instagram, a website, a newsletter?
Definitely on Instagram. As my handle is the Quiltographer, and I pretty much put a lot of my work on there, not all of it. I do have a website where I have all of my photo galleries. And sometimes if potential clients want to see like what does an actual photo gallery look like your finished product, I will send them links to some examples of ones that I've done in the past from that website so they can just see like overall what does it look like when you mail me a quilt to photograph.
And I will make sure to link your Instagram in the show notes. Can I link your website as well
You
so
can.
people can see your work? Okay. And then are there any upcoming projects or offerings or anything new that you're excited about and you want to share?
I don't have anything specific coming up right now, but I am always excited to have people reach out to me and ask about getting their quilts photographed, or even just with wanting tips on how to photograph their quilts themselves. I love to talk about quilts and I love to talk about photography. So I just love new friends.
So for upcoming projects, though, you said that there was a book that you photographed that's coming out. When is that book coming out?
I think it's due later this year. I'm not sure of the exact date yet, and I don't want to share too much about it in case things change for the author of the book, but hopefully this year.
That's so exciting. Okay, final question, and this is my favorite. In the spirit of Quilt Scouts and, creative adventure, what does a quilting adventure look like for you right now?
So something that I've been wanting to try that I just haven't made the time for is learning Photoshop. Like I said, I edit all my photos, but I would love to learn Photoshop specifically just so that I can change some like different elements in the photos, even if it's like changing the color of the wall or the color of, the bedspread where the quilt's on. I just think that would
Yes.
be just like a super fun thing to learn that hopefully this year I will make time for that.
Photoshop. I never would have thought about that, but yeah, just being able to tweak, especially for a book, right, to get like the color story right or whatever. That would be
Exactly.
fun to learn. And that would be quite a new adventure to be going on, like learning a whole new skill, a whole new skill set, I should say. Well, thank you so much, Megan, for coming on the podcast and taking time to talk with me. I feel like I learned so much from you, and you really have my wheels turning on how I can take better quilt photos. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me. This was really great.
If you enjoyed this episode, I would love for you to follow or subscribe to the Quilt Scouts podcast so you don't miss future episodes. And if you have a minute, leaving a review is one of the best ways to help this podcast find other quilters who could use a little creativity and community too. You can find show notes and more from Quilt Scouts at quiltscouts.com. Until next time, happy Trail Scout.